Let me take a second here and tell you guys about Anchor. Anchor.fm is the podcast hosting platform that we actually used to launch this podcast, Hungry for Wisdom. If you want to start a podcast, you want to get some good doctrinal content out into the podcast space, which, look, we need a lot more of it, right? We would love for the world to be filled with gospel conversation. So you got something to contribute there, then you go over to Anchor.fm. You get it set up. It's free to use and really user-friendly, actually. We've been really happy with it. So you can make all your decisions and customize your settings up front. And then every time you upload an episode, boom, you're up on Spotify. You're up on Apple Podcasts. You're up on Stitcher. You're up anywhere you want to go. You want to monetize? Do it. You want to invite some audience feedback, some questions, some things like that? Do it. It's got all your metrics right there. You can figure out exactly what's going on behind the scenes on your podcast, and information is power, so you can continually improve it. So check out Anchor.fm to launch your podcast. Now, let's get back to this one and gain some wisdom. On today's episode of Hungry for Wisdom, God likes his kids. Deal with it. God saves real people, not fake ones. And bad news, your pastor is a fake one. It's episode 19. Turn it up! Welcome to Hungry for Wisdom. This is the podcast for people who want to know what God knows. He hasn't told us everything, but man, he has told us a lot. I'm Dustin, pastor at Grace and Truth. If you want to know what God knows, let's dig in. Episode 19 is dedicated to Real Man of Genius. No, do you think Bud Light's going to sue us for that?
They are.
They're coming after me. That was a Bud Light idea. Mr. Regular Joe Christian Entrepreneur Business Starter Upper. Or something. That's the last time I'm doing that, man.
No, I don't know. It worked. Right. It worked. I'll go with it. I'll take it.
So kick back and crack an duels, O King of Christendom. Anyway, so I got with me here the guy that we are dedicating this thing to. Now, we have dedicated episodes before. It might have been like episode 2 or something to Romeo Surf for all of your marketing needs. Yeah.
You've already done one.
I did. Well, yeah, we gave you a shout out at the beginning. But today, ladies and gentlemen, today I have the man. Chris Nolte, who is the creator, the designer, I don't know, what's your title at Romeo Surf?
You know, it's evolving. I really, honestly, I'm learning. So this is a long story. Do you really want to get into this?
We'll get into it in a minute. First thing we're going to do is we're going to get into some Proverbs. All right, so
let's do that.
What we are doing here is satisfying an insatiable appetite for wisdom.
Here we go.
And an insatiable appetite for techno. No, my techno appetite's been satiated. Sated. I don't know what the right word is for that, so I'm going to move on. We are in Proverbs 3, verses 3 through 4 today. It says this: Do not let kindness and truth leave you. Bind them around your neck. Write them on the tablet of your heart, so you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. All right, guys, what am I always yelling at you here about interpreting the Bible? Context, context, context. So the context here, and this is important because we're talking about how to get God's favor, right? We want the whole picture. So the context here is Proverbs 3, verse 1, which says, "My son, do not forget my teaching." So a father is talking to his son, and he's setting him up for life. One of the things that happens as a pastor is that I sit with people as they're dying, right? I get to hear a lot of people's last words, last wishes, last thoughts, things like that. And it's really a privilege because I feel like I'm getting their personal book of Proverbs, at a moment where very few people get to listen to it. So I want you to see the book of Proverbs like that. It's like Solomon's taking his last stand saying to his kid, "Listen, big guy, I love you. I want you to do well. And here's what you need to know in order to do well." These are words that are soaked in experience and in blood and in regret and in some victories and all of that. So we got to put some weight on this stuff. If your dad was going to die and wrote you a letter with everything that he could think of that you needed to know, you would not treat that like any other letter. That's not junk mail. You would read that thing until it wore out, and then you'd copy it so you can read it some more. And so that's what we're doing here with Proverbs. It's not just good advice. This is life-giving guidance from a good dad. So here he says in verse 3, don't let kindness and truth leave you. And it's funny that he says that because if you stop and think about it, those are the first two things to go when the pressure is on, right? Like the kindness thing, I get a little snippy. I get a little mean. And when we do that, we feel justified because, hey, man, we got a lot going on. You don't know the stress I'm under. And so kindness leaves us. Or maybe we don't worry about the truth so much, right? Maybe instead we say what needs to be said to get through the moment. But here Solomon says, yo, don't roll like that. It's not going to turn out the way that you think it is. So if we stick to truth, we stick to kindness, then look at the results. Verse 4, you will find favor and good repute in the sight of God and man. So in other words, it's got positive effects. Now, don't get carried away with this finding favor with God thing, right? Because finding favor in the sight of God, he's not talking here about getting saved. He's not talking here about entering into a salvation, like a saving relationship. We don't go to heaven for being nice enough, right? That's not the gospel. That's not Christianity. But the fact is that God loves to see his kids act like Christ. He just does. And so he responds with positive emotions, and yes, God has emotions, and he responds favorably when we are kind as Christ is kind. Because Jesus was always full of kindness and truth. We actually named our church after this verse, right? John 1:14. We've seen his glory as of the only begotten from the Father, full of grace and truth. And the Hebrew word for grace is chesed, which is usually translated in the Old Testament as in the NASB, it's like loving kindness, right? So he never let kindness leave him. He never let truth leave him. Says it again in John 1:17. The law came through Moses, grace and truth came through Jesus Christ. So, of course, when you treat people with kindness and with truth, there are benefits to your social life. So, look, we didn't all have good dads, right? But what would a good dad tell you about how to get along in life? Act like Jesus, treat people with respect. That's all that Solomon's saying here. So sometimes wisdom is not hard to grasp. It's hard to execute, but it's not hard to grasp. And that's what he's saying here in Proverbs chapter 3, right? So as we've got the playbook to win the Super Bowl of life, just keep that in mind. Like have that as your flagship. He says, write it on the tablets of your heart, man. Wear it around your neck. It's like a piece of jewelry. You want a big old like grace or kindness and truth Flavor Flav sign on the front of you so that when you interact with people, that's immediately where their eyes are drawn because that's what they associate with you. Crazy glasses and the big pendulum around your neck of kindness and truth. With me, though, is a guy who displays both. Chris Nolte. What up, buddy?
Wow, thanks for having me and that intro.
Yeah,
Very
so
nice.
You started up a company called Romeo Surf. I want to know how it all went down, and I want to know why you picked that name.
Okay, we're going to come back to what you just said on Proverbs 2.
All right.
That's one of my questions today, and you just added a question is what you did. So
making work for myself.
Romeo Surf is my attempt at starting my own thing as far as marketing, advertising, design, and whatnot in that arena. Now, as a kid, I loved movie trailers and commercials. I thought they were incredible. I was drawn to them.
Interesting fact, the guy that does the announcing voice on The Real Men of Genius was a movie trailer announcer.
See?
Full circle.
Yeah, we're there.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, that's exactly.
I interrupted you. That is not the last time that's going to happen.
It's
Go
fine.
ahead.
It's fine. So it's funny how God works, and he brings me full circle. He puts something on my heart at a young age, advertising. I loved it. And then I go and do this odd thing that I did in my life, and eventually he brought me right back to this thing that I love and that I like to be a part of. And I got great big dreams and visions that I'm learning now that I don't need that. And this goes back to what I was saying earlier, that it's a long story. I'm evolving, and currently I see myself as a digital maintenance man, if you will. So I help these companies, one of which you had Tricia McFarlane on just the other day.
Yep.
I help them out in a way where I can bring some skills and some talents to them at a reduced price and get them off the ground on some things, right? None of this is going to be award-winning stuff. Mm-hmm. You know, if we build a PowerPoint for this client or a flyer for that client or a website for that client, none of it's going to be seen by anybody outside this community. And I'm learning to be okay with that. Because my dreams were big, right?
Well, in an advertisement, you're thinking about maximum number of eyeballs on this thing.
Yes, yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And we still want to hit our audience. We have strategy. We've got to figure out who our audience is, what the message is, and how we're going to deliver it. So there's fundamentals are still there, but I'm learning that the resources I have, backing up a little bit, I just got out of a 10 to 12 year education for free. I worked for one of the greatest designers in Washington State, if not the West Coast. And I got to work under him and learn the guy named Tim McGinnis, Nuke Digital. And I got to learn so many great things that it got to the point where, okay, I kind of want to step out and do my own thing now. I want to take this education, which ain't done. I still got a lot to learn. But
if you're still breathing, you're still learning.
That's right. That's right. And take that and go and do this for myself, a childhood dream, really, to have my own business in this arena. And that was mind blowing. And my wife incredibly supportive, which in her nature, risk isn't a thing. She likes it, laid out, and that paycheck every 2 weeks is a nice thing to count on. And we're going to step away from this and give this a go. And God must have been on her heart about this, because she's been nothing but supportive. And I feared that there'd be a little bit of tension there, and it hasn't been. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, and I just think it's boss that you launched a business during a pandemic.
Yeah.
Like, who told you that was a good idea?
Can you trust the Lord too much? Because literally, these are the things I'm talking about with my wife. I don't know. It'll be fine. Yeah. He's always taken care of us, and he has. And it is, spirit, a business, a marriage. Gosh, I heard a great podcast the other day. I want to share it with you. The buildings, when they build a building, it's going to withstand. 100% of the time, it's going to stand up. It's going to take this kind of abuse. It can handle this kind of an earthquake. The engineering behind a building is flawless. We know,
and it has to be just to meet code at this point.
Right. You're not going to build a building and go, we've got a 97% chance this thing's going to be fine. We know the engineering's there for thousands of years. We've been getting better at this, right? Mm-hmm. Why aren't marriages solid like that? Why aren't businesses solid? Because there's a spiritual element to those things, right? That God's teaching me so much just in this journey of business and relationships now with customers. I had that previously, but they weren't my customers. Of course I'm going to be friendly. Hey, get the deal done, take care of the client, make the margins. It's a little different now.
You're not a hired gun anymore.
Right. Yeah. These are very important people. They always were, but not like this.
Well, now you feel responsible for them.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And that's one of the, I didn't say this at the beginning, but we're calling this, I'm starting this new segment. You're actually the first one to do one of these segments with me. And we're just calling it Joe Christian, right? Because I want people to hear, and actually when we started this podcast, you and me were talking, this whole thing was your idea. I want people to hear that Christianity is lived out in the normal. And that's what I meant at the beginning when I said, your pastor is actually a fake person, because when people think, the Christian life, they think about the people that are visible. I'm the guy on the stage. I'm the guy on the live stream, whatever. And so they look at their pastors and they think, which is fine. I mean, Hebrews 13 says, obey your pastors and emulate them, right? Okay. So fine. That's a good thing to do, but we can lose sight of the fact that normal Christianity, right? Like, God makes a whole lot of Christians. A few of us are pastors. Right. So what does he, if we take that hint, what does he want to see more of? Right. He wants to see more of what I call the beautiful normal. So a guy taking what he's always been passionate about, going out into the world and doing whatever he's supposed to do in the marketplace with it, and accomplishing something for the kingdom of God with that. And so as you go out in faith, you're accomplishing something, right? Let alone having a story to tell about it. It's going to encourage somebody else. So this is the stuff that Jesus died for. It's weird to say that Jesus died for a graphic designer or, something like that, but it's true.
Yeah. No, and you need to hear that. You've counseled me before on how can I even start a business when there's people suffering, when there's people that are going to hell, that we should be out. Shouldn't we all be missionaries? And your response that day over breakfast really helped me kind of gather. I still struggle with that thought process. Mm-hmm. I come in Sunday and we have a great service and I feel nourished, and I'm like, how can we do anything? How can we go on vacations? How can we do? I struggle with that, and
you feel like a consumer every time you do something fun.
Yeah. So finding the balance. I visiting with my wife just the other day about C.S. Lewis quote about tithing and how much you should tithe. Okay. And he kind of basically says there's no real, in short, there's no number, there's no percentage. It should pinch you.
Yep.
It should get to the point where you're not doing some of the things you'd like to be doing because you're giving too much.
Yeah, give until it hurts a little.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So in that kind of context, that's where I don't struggle as much. You've helped me on that, but it still crosses my mind, how on earth can we do anything without struggling, to think that I should be out there knocking on doors.
Well, yeah, but now to bring in the other side of that, sure. you get to work with some of the most effective ministers of the gospel in Tri-Cities, right? And I'm not talking about pastors. I'm talking about the in fact, dude, we should do an episode with Grace Kitchen.
Yeah.
Get Devin down here.
Wonderful. Yeah.
Oh yeah, Devin and Amanda.
Yeah.
Strap up a couple of mics for them.
Like peeps. Yeah.
Woo!
Yeah.
Yeah. So you get to work with those guys. You get to work with Trisha down at Mirror Ministries and all of that. I mean, you've built our website. Little known fact, guys. The logo, the little red radio that is the logo for this podcast, Chris made that, right? So I mean, just stuff like that. It's like the people that get the credit for sending the word of God out. I get more credit than I should because I'm the guy with the microphone, right? But that's the tip of the spear. There's a whole spear behind that, and that's part of the mission. So yeah, I think it's great, man.
Yeah, it's been a journey. I'm looking forward to seeing where it goes. I'm getting more and more opportunities. Clients are sharing my name, so I'm seeing some things that I want to do. Putting it all together, we're at a point now where, are we going to take on an employee? Are we going to partner with somebody? I don't like either one of those options. I would like to find somebody, young graphic designer with some mad skills that would open their own LLC and come alongside me. I'll pay him most of the money. I don't care about the money, but I'm about to the point where I'm going to need some help. Things are happening in a pandemic kind of client. Which
I shouldn't say this on a microphone, but do they have to be local?
Oh, no, not at all.
Okay, well, let's talk off mic. I've got an idea.
Great.
Before I commit somebody that has no idea what I'm talking about. Yeah, I got a phone number for you.
Good.
Okay, so why the name Romeo Surf? Your name is neither Romeo nor Surf.
Right.
You are suave. You are a debonair man.
Right.
But you're not named Romeo.
No, it's not that exciting.
Are you a surfer?
No. I love the culture though. It's a neat culture. And as far as what's available with that brand, long story short, I wanted a name that was going to stick in somebody's mind, right? People have Uber. Hey, have you heard about this Uber? What is this Uber people are talking about? I wanted a name that was a little bit different, a little bit off key. What my son tells me, Dad, it sounds like a dating website. And I'm like,
Romeo Surf.
This was after I'm already established.
It sounds like a sleazy dating website.
It does, doesn't it? Oh, it broke me a little bit, but I'm all right. I'm going through the new URLs, .com, .org, .net. Those have been around forever, right? .info. Well, for years, new URLs are popping up. They've been around for quite a while, but it seems they really haven't hit the mainstream. You've seen .co for company. Yep. You've seen some of them, starting to happen, and then there's some clever ones out there. But when I was working with Nuke Digital, I picked up .digital, and so it was Nuke.digital, and I just I wanted to see more of these URLs out there. So I'm looking through all the available new URL domain addresses, and .surf came across, and I'm like, that would be cool. What a cool brand available. If you could find a name that you liked, .surf is surfing. Nobody has a problem with surfing. It's just, all of us kind of think it's kind of cool. I wouldn't do it. I tried it once. I about broke my jaw, so I'll never do it again.
Broke your jaw in the water?
Oh,
you hit the board?
Yeah, the board came back up, shot up, and it about put me under.
It's hard, man.
So I'm done with that.
Yeah, everybody's got respect for the surfers, and you're right. It is kind of a harmless vibe they put off. It's just generally agreeable.
Yeah, and they have cool gear. They have the coolest T-shirts. It's neat. So
even the hang loose symbol with your hand.
Right.
It just feels good to flash somebody the hang loose.
Yeah, you do.
That's my go-to move, by the way. If I see you driving on the road, you're going to get a hang loose from me. I'm not a surfer.
Go for it. Yeah. So the culture's pretty cool, and then I'm just I pass by it thinking that's neat, and I keep coming back to it. And eventually I'm like, it's got to be .surf. I just don't know what else, and for some reason, I don't know, Romeo pops into my mind, and I'm like, how am I going to explain this to people? And so I start coming up with a list of things, but that's the real story, Oh, surfing, you ride waves of marketing, ride waves of what's popular, and none of that. It's not that sexy. It's not that cool. It's just a name that I wanted something unique that people might remember.
Yeah. Well, and if you're helping people with their advertising, their marketing, whatever, then what that does is that gives them permission to just, why not?
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Hey, what does Romeo Surf mean? Nothing in particular. Who do you, how do you want to present yourself?
Yeah, absolutely. If you're doing a good job and you're honest and your integrity's there and you're serving your client, you can name your automotive business anything.
Yeah.
It can be anything. It can be grandma's old logo, and we'll clean it up a little bit, but it can have any name. People will come to you as long as what is business really? It's repeat business usually, and it's referrals,
word of mouth.
You can, if you're selling tennis rackets online, okay, you got to deal with search engine optimization, all that other stuff. But if you're a local company, it's done on relationships, and that's the tagline right at the top of my website. It's relationship marketing. I'm going to come alongside you, and we're going to work together. You're going to get the resources I have available, like building your logo, I took elements that already exist and tweaked them. Maintenance man, right? If I were to go and build these brochures and stuff out of whole cloth, it'd be much more expensive.
Yeah.
Many more hours. So we're going to find the right templates. We're going to bring in your colors, your fonts, and do everything and give you a nice brochure that you can stand behind and not a lot of money to do it.
Yep.
You're not paying a designer 3-4 days worth of work to build something out of whole cloth. That gets expensive.
Yeah. So if somebody wanted to procure your services, because we got a lot of guys launching businesses, right? I've given them shout outs here before. So, I mean, we got Levi out there at Fulcrum Electric. We got Travis out there at,
sorry, Travis.
Yeah. Sorry, Travis. Love you, bro. All right, guys. Now you got to listen to every podcast episode to see which one I dedicated to Travis's welding business. Anyway, but so somebody launches a business or something, they need some help. How do they get a hold of you?
Best way is romeo.surf, the website. There's a contact form in there. Email address chris@romeo.surf. But either way, if you remember the name, you'll find me.
Yeah,
Google
cool.
search pulls it up. It's odd. It's unique.
Yeah.
A Google search pulls it up.
So by the way, guys, his address also, no, I'm messing around. So the other thing that we were, because I called you up and I said, hey man, I got to get you on a mic. And you were like, all right, I'm down. And so you told me that you wanted to bring in some Bible questions, So, and the reason I agreed to this is because this is part of what normal Christianity is, right? It's just like, hey, I've been reading my Bible. I got questions. So, it's pretty common to do it like a pastor Q&A on this. Normally it's, I just take questions that people have had, throw them on a list, and we just pull off 2 or 3 for each episode, right? But then I've seen them before. Now my commitment is I don't do a bunch of research, right? But I'm putting the show together.
Yeah.
I've seen them before.
Yeah.
I have no clue what you're about to ask me.
Yeah, that's
right?
fair. I like
so
that.
we're just going to do like straight up discipleship. You guys get to see what this looks like, man. We're a couple of guys reasoning through the Bible.
Yeah. If in the event that you say, I'm not going to have a good answer for this,
I don't
that's
know.
Great. The authenticity that I've noticed with you over the years has been refreshing.
Well, so yeah, and by the way, Chris does this to me sometimes. We'll go out for coffee, go out for breakfast or whatever. He's like, hey, I was thinking, is there a code buried in the numerology of that Hebrew word and whatever? I'm making that up.
Yeah.
You always got something to throw at me that makes me, I mean, they can't see, but my face kind of twists and I go, I hadn't thought about that before. So.
Maybe here and there. Yeah.
All right, man.
Yeah. I want an entire segment
stretch
of I got questions, right? So
All right.
I got questions.
Crack my neck.
First, I'm going to beat you up a little bit about Sunday. You dug on St. Francis of Assisi.
Yeah.
What was it's preach the gospel at all times.
And if worse comes to worse, use words.
And you hate that.
I don't like it.
But earlier you said context.
Yep.
That's another one of your big. You like saying that. Mm-hmm. What was his context in saying that? Because let me tell you my frame here. I love that quote. I've always loved that quote. And you and you put a spike in me that Sunday.
Straight up Pete and your Wheaties, man.
Yeah, you did. And so I got to thinking, ignoring what you were saying at the moment because I was defending why I like this. and it occurred to me, well, if he's saying that we need to live this lifestyle at all times,
That's a good thing
we
to
make
say.
things both work?
Yeah.
If his context is that we don't all know Scripture and we don't all, and he's talking to a group that says, and he's telling them, listen, live your life in that manner. You're not all going to be pastors. You're not all going to know the word.
I cheat. I get to study the Bible full time.
Right. So I'm just trying to back you off a little bit on that quote a little bit.
No can do, bro. No can do. I'm sorry.
Now it can be used wrong, right?
Yeah.
People can run with it and go, "Oh yeah, I that's what my motto is." You still gotta deliver the gospel, but both can't be right. You're telling me.
Well, let's get to the context.
Okay.
So the context of that quote. So the story goes, and this is the 1400s.
Okay,
so who knows,
good.
Right?
Right.
Francis was a Benedictine monk, I think. Might have been an Augustinian monk. I forget which order. Anyway, I think he was a Benedictine monk. And he told his guys, his friars, he said, all right, guys, we're going to leave the monastery today. We're going to go down into the village of Assisi, and we're going to preach the gospel. They said, cool. So they go down, and he says, hey, take this bread and go give it to that widow over there. You guys go play soccer with those kids. I don't know if there was soccer back then, but, you go play with those kids. So they go out, and they're just blessing people in the community. They get done at the end of the day. He says, all right, guys, we're going back up to the monastery. And they said, but Francis, we never preached the gospel. And he said, every act of service you did was preaching the gospel. And so the story goes, at that point, he had the mic drop moment, and he said, you are to preach the gospel at all times. And if worse comes to worse, use words. Now, I cry foul on that because I think there's a lot of people that could have heard the gospel that day that didn't, and it was a cop-out.
Yeah.
And I think that quote gets used a lot.
It does.
To chicken out of actually sharing the gospel with somebody. Could it be used properly or appropriately? I would say if it was going to be used appropriately, you got to take out the phrase "if worse comes to worst," because I don't
think that's the right phrase. I'm going to bust your chops on that. I think it's preach the gospel at all times, and if necessary, use words.
Yeah, and that's a softer version of the same error, I think.
Yeah, okay.
Because
that's fair.
In Romans 10 it says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. So I do affirm the fact that we can communicate the love of Christ through our actions without ever opening our mouth. Okay. And I think when we go and feed the homeless or we do acts of charity or whatever, I mean, working down at Grace Kitchen, if you don't get to have conversations with people, you're still living the gospel out. However, can somebody understand that Jesus died for their sins, rose on the third day, and you were saved in his name by watching you serve food? Right. No, it can be a heck of an open door, and that can be a good application of the gospel, but there is no substitute for speaking the gospel.
Yeah, yeah. And therein, we're back to my struggle in that, okay, daily life, dealing with clients that are secular and of the faith. Should I, before I hang up that phone, be saying, hey, can we talk to you about Jesus for a little bit? Every client, or is treating them with respect and kindness, and I don't cuss, and I live that lifestyle. Is that doing that part? It's not enough. I'm not talking to every client and saying, hey, have you heard about the story of Jesus? Do you know why that's important?
Yeah. So, boy, I'm a jerk here. Context is is important. So we'll let me use an example of somebody we both know. We both know a guy pretty well. You know him a little better than I do, and he drives a garbage truck for a living. Yeah. All right. So he is, he spends most of his days in a truck. He's not talking to people. And when he does talk to people, a lot of times it's guys at the shop about what route they're going to take or whatever, right? And yet, he is a far more effective evangelist than me, even though I get to share the gospel with a lot more people. And if you just look at percentages of gospel conversations, let's say he interacts with 10 people on a daily basis, I interact with 100, and yet somehow he leads more people to Christ than I do through personal interaction, right? So why is that? Is it because he's squeezing the gospel into places where it didn't fit? No, I would say, and it'd be interesting to hear his phraseology, but as I've watched him work over the last number of years, what he's doing is he's wondering where God has opened a door, and where he sees an open door, he walks through it. So if you're on the phone with a client, maybe the question would be not, okay, how can I fulfill my own personal law by articulating the gospel in this conversation? Maybe the question would be, God, have you opened a door here that I'm about to ignore?
Gotcha.
Right? Yeah. So the same thing is the principle on tithing, make sure that it's a little bit uncomfortable for you. Maybe we should do the same thing with evangelism. And this is one of my goals is like with ministry in general, whether it's evangelism or missions or whatever. If your palms aren't sweating, you're in your will, not God's will. And that's an overstatement, obviously. That's not a universal truth, but it's worth thinking about,
Yeah.
One thing that I like to do is when I'm on hold. So my hard drive on my Mac, I guess the spinning hard drives, you'd probably know more about this. The spinning hard drives on the Mac and the year that I bought it, it's just no good. It always burns out. I couldn't figure out what was wrong with my computer. I thought it was a program I was running or whatever. So I'm spending all of this time, calling Apple Care, right? And sometimes you got to restart the computer and you just got to wait. So that person was obligated. I had a captive audience, right? Yeah. I got to share the gospel with some people. And one of them might have come to Christ. I'm not sure. She might have just been telling me what she thought I wanted to hear. Right. But there might have been a conversion there. I'll never find out.
Yeah. But you had the time.
Yeah, give it a shot,
Yep. Okay. Good. I'm still liking that quote, but I won't elevate it as high.
Well, look, I'll pray for you.
All right, you ready for the question number one?
Well, no, to be fair, and I do need to come around to the other side. Let me talk out of both sides of my mouth for a second, okay? So it's just as easy to ignore the other side of that quote and say, once I cram the gospel verbally down somebody's throat, my job is done, and we ignore the ministry of deed because we've accomplished the ministry of word. And in that case, I think Francis of Assisi would put his foot across our face, and rightfully so. Right. I'll meet you halfway on that.
Okay, good. Right. I could get there. All right, question number one. Jesus says, I am the way, right? Mm-hmm. Nobody comes to the Father but by me.
John 14:6.
On the cross, it is finished, right?
John 19:30.
So he paid the debt, period, right? He decides.
1 John 2:2, by the way. Sorry.
Yeah.
For the,
Yeah,
listen-
no, this
for,
is
the,
good.
for the listeners.
Yeah, this
There
is
you go.
great. This is good. It's his. He owns it.
He owns what?
He paid the debt, so he's judge, jury.
Okay.
Right?
Yep.
He forgave all sins at that moment, right? And that's what I want to know is sin like a blanket in that Adam and Eve sinned, boom. It's just kind of like, have you ever seen Star Wars, like, what was it? Attack of the Clones, where they have these like bombs in space and they just go boom.
Yeah.
It's a cool scene. Love it. Sin enters the world. Boom. And it just canvases. It's there. It's happening. We got to talk about babies again too. I forgot about that. When he pays that ultimate price, the perfect sacrifice, does he eliminate that blanket? You know, now it's a decision for the sinner to believe in him. And then but the sin's forgiven. It's done. He's paid the price
Across the board, blanket
for
forgiven.
sin.
Okay.
Not fair?
Missing an element.
Okay.
The element that is missing is that, and we're going to see this here in 1 John 1:9 in a second, which is a well-known verse and should be. Everybody listening should memorize that verse. It's glorious. So the missing element is individual relationship. Okay. So the way that forgiveness works is that he accomplished it once for all and applies it moment by moment to the sinner. So I can say two things are true at once, and they seem like they're in different realms, but they both come together in the cross. One is that I am saved, period. My sin has been forgiven. 2,000 years ago on the cross, Jesus said it was finished, and he was right. So my sin has been forgiven. I can also say he forgive that when I sin, I need to ask him for forgiveness. Okay? So 1 John 1:9 is where this comes together. He says, if we confess our sin, he is faithful and just to forgive us our sin and to cleanse us from all unrighteousness. Now, if that's the only passage of scripture we had, it would seem like if we don't confess our sin, we're not forgiven. Right? Which is kind of where you end up with some of the Catholic doctrine where you got to get last rites when you're about to die. They don't call them last rites anymore. They call them something else. I forget. But, you got priests showing up to the hospital to like splash water on people because they've sinned since their last confession and that they haven't confessed it. Right. You got to cleanse them. So, if that was the only verse we had, we would have some eternal insecurity, you know, because if I die in a car accident, it's over. Right. So thankfully there are other verses which say not one will be snatched from my hand. John 10, not one will be snatched from the Father's hand. We've got this double grasping where our soul is inside of the hand of Jesus, which is inside of the hand of the Father. And it's like a double glove. Right. So that's that. You've got other passages actually inside of 1 John, which you just brought up, and I shouted out 1 John 2:2. He is the propitiation for our sins, and not yours and mine only, but also the sins of the whole world. So there's a universality to it, and yet there's an individual moment-by-moment application of it. So the way that this has been articulated through church history is and I don't know where the first place was that this was said, but it came down to us this way. We have been saved, we are being saved, and we will be saved. Okay? So we have been saved on the cross. We are being saved from our sin moment by moment. When I commit a sin, God is saving me from that, and I am not at risk of going to hell because of that sin. Why? Not just because of the work that he did 2,000 years ago, period, but because the work that he did 2,000 years ago is continually being applied to me in my sin. And we will be saved. All who call on the name of the Lord will be saved. I know my destiny. So, yeah, he died to forgive all sin, period. But the application of that forgiveness is only, that forgiveness is only applied to the one who has faith in him, and it's applied every sin you sin for the rest of your life. Right? And we make good use of that forgiveness when we confess. We run to him, we say, please forgive my sin, and we know his answer is yes. Yeah. Which is a great comfort, you know? Which, by the way, we know this from experience, too. If you follow Jesus for a while, you know what it feels like to have sin standing between you and him. Now, he dealt with that on the cross, and yet it's a factor in your relationship right now. Yeah. Right? No, absolutely. So it may not be keeping you from heaven, but it's jacking up your relationship with him. And John Owen made this point. John Owen was a Puritan back in the 1600s. He wrote a book called The Mortification of Sin. And his whole point was, we fight sin not because we're scared of hell. Right? We believe the cross. We believe the resurrection. We're saved from that. We fight sin not because we're scared of hell, but because it threatens the quality of our relationship with God. And that's what's most precious to us. So, Yeah. If I understand your question right, did God forgive all sin at once? I would say yes, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Yeah, absolutely. It's almost like a jail cell's been opened, and he's standing on the outside of that. Are we going to come together? Are we going to get, can I get you out of there? Will you come to me? Mm-hmm. So the jail cell's open, but people are not, they still want it their own way. They're still, it's separated.
Well, yeah. I mean, if you're in jail for, let's say, okay, so mature content warning. If you're in the car with your kids, look, like you said, I just talked to Tricia McFarland with Mirror Ministries, sex trafficking rescue, and all of this. This is a great example. If you're in jail and you're under the wrath of God for sex trafficking a minor, let's say, and he says, look, I'm willing to forgive all sin, come accept my forgiveness. And your first question is, do I have to stop sexually exploiting minors? Right? The door might be open, but you ain't walking through it. Right?
Good. Okay. I'm happy with that. Question 2. And these are elementary questions, so I hope you don't.
Oh, no, that was deep. That was deep.
Good.
Yeah,
good.
That was seminary level, actually.
Good. Young Earth.
Ah.
Young Earth guy, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I'm actually a gap theory guy, believe it or not.
Gap theory.
Yeah, I'm going to lose half my audience right here.
Well, before I even ask this question, I think it's very important that it's all done in 31 verses.
Yeah.
He didn't give us a lot of context.
Right. He didn't write a science textbook.
Right. There's so much more on money and relationships than the creation of the universe. So I think he's probably saying, don't dwell on this. Mm-hmm. Right.
He was making a different point, which is God made it, so he owns it.
Yeah. Yeah. I love it. Love it. We know light from stars we can measure that distance. Mm-hmm. They're a long ways away, and that light traveled a long ways. So there's something there. We also know that day 4 we get a sun and a moon.
Yeah.
Okay. So what was a day prior to us having? So there's some things here that I'm not struggling with. It doesn't bother me. I actually enjoy it. But is it possible that the Earth is millions of years old? Possible. I'm not going to live by it.
I wasn't there. I don't know.
Right. Is it possible it's millions of years old, and then at some point humans are introduced, and both can work out. Both can live comfortably. You think so?
So now I'm going to speak for myself here, not the position of grace and truth community.
Yeah.
Right?
I'm good with that.
The other pastors might disagree with me on this. I don't know.
And this is your current standing, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and that's me too.
I could be wrong. In fact, I'll even tell you where the weak points of my argument are. Okay, so yeah, I think to answer your question, yes, it's possible to have a really old material Earth, old dirt, old rocks, whatever. 6,000-year-old humanity. I do not think that humanity could have arisen gradually. And so my boundary on this is in Romans 5, it says sin entered the world through one man and death through sin. So if you don't have a literal Adam, then Romans 5 is nonsense. And Romans 5 explains the gospel pretty well, right? So you don't really have a gospel at that point. I don't think that a Christian evolutionist can consistently account for the gospel in the book of Romans. Okay, so that's my youngness coming out, my young earthness coming out. That being said, the gap theory says this. Genesis 1:1 says, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Genesis 1:2 says, and the earth was formless and void. Okay? Gap theory says we don't know how much time was between those two things. Sure. Right? So, and the question comes up, why put any time between those two things? And my answer is, in Ezekiel 28, there's a lament over Satan. Now he's called the king of Tyre, but we know, angels get they get labeled as princes of Persia or princes of Tyre or Sidon or whatever. So it's pretty clear in Ezekiel 28 that he's talking about an angelic being because he laments his fall from heaven, basically, same as Isaiah 14. So he describes a situation where this exalted angelic being was roaming the earth, and there were all sorts of precious gems there, and it was great. And he was basically, he had a certain measure of authority over here, right? But then he got proud and he was judged, and then the earth was judged with him. Well, the question is, when did that happen with Satan, right? And so the reason that I'm a gap theory guy, and I say there's probably some space in there where the earth was created and then it was made formless and void. Why was it made formless and void? Well, Ezekiel 28 would fit in there. So maybe it was made, it was an angelic playground, then the fall of Satan happens, boom, God judges the earth, makes it formless and void, and then the creation of all this stuff happens. So the other reason that might work out is because there's two other places in the Old Testament where the terms for formless and void, in Hebrew, tohu vevohu, right? There are two other places where that phrase is used, and they're both used in reference to God's judgment. He wiped them out. He made this place formless and void. Mm-hmm. So if we read that then back into Genesis and say, well, if that's a statement of judgment, like it is the other two places, then it would read, in the beginning God created the heavens and the earth was made formless and void in judgment. Well, why? Well, Ezekiel 28 would explain that. So who knows? Maybe it was millions of years. Yeah. Or maybe the fire that God threw down here aged the earth a little bit quicker because heat does that, I mean, I don't know. Yeah. But the weak point of my argument is that, so to summarize, I'm a gap theory guy because I don't know what else to do with Ezekiel 28. All right. And it has the advantage of explaining old dirt and fossils and, whatever. I mean, like fossils. Okay, something dies, and this is just my rudimentary understanding of it. Something dies, the skeleton goes underground, and then water moves through this thing and replaces the relatively young living being with very old minerals, and boom, you got a fossil. Well, those minerals could have been billions of years old. I don't know. So that's why you think you got a billion-year-old fossil. But the weak point of my argument is that actually creates a second creation event, which the Bible doesn't actually specify. Mm-hmm. And that is a problem. I don't know how to answer for that. So that's where I'm at on
good.
that.
I'm good. You're doing fine here. I'm proud of you.
Well, thank you.
I already threw a couple of questions, and you did just great. Good.
Your strength gives me strength.
Is for kings to search it out. What's the verse?
Yeah. Proverbs 25:2. I think it's the glory of God to conceal a matter, and the honor of kings to seek it out.
I've never felt that he hides things in unexplainable ways.
Yeah,
and it may only be 31 verses, but I think there's more there that over the next 200-300 years we might dig up a few things and this is probably where that's coming. We might get a better understanding. I don't think it's necessary.
No, you beautifully put. And that's the thing. Like Moses wrote that for a reason, and it is possible for us to ask questions that God never cared to answer. That being said, if there's information in the text about it, I want to know what it is. Yeah. Right? But I don't want to lose focus either.
Right. Exactly. Okay. Question 3.
Or we could divide the whole church over it. Let's do that. It's been done.
I was going to say it probably has happened. It's been done. New heaven, new earth.
I'm in favor, by the way. I vote yes.
Yes, please. Is there marriage in new heaven, new earth? Is new earth? It will Chris be able to come to earth and the new earth and have a graphic design firm and do things for the glory of God for eternity?
Yeah, but what was that about marriage?
So that's it's a 2-part question. So that you're answering yes. That we're gonna. Can we go back and forth, heaven and earth?
Well, they'll be one and the same, rejoining.
Gotcha.
Yeah, in Revelation 21, he says I saw the new heaven coming down out of heaven, right? And it comes down to earth. And so at the Garden of Eden, you basically had heaven on earth. You had paradise, right?
Right.
When sin happened, there was a separation of those
sense.
realms.
Yeah.
That's a reuniting of those realms.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
No marriage.
Right.
Will we be male and female?
That's a great question. I got to dip into church history for this one because I don't think there's an answer in the Bible.
Yeah.
Could be wrong. So Augustine answered this question in the early 400s. Early 400s? Whatever. He said, he was answering the question, what are our resurrection bodies going to be like? And he said, I don't know, but we know that we will be recognizable because 1 Thessalonians 4 says that we will be back with our loved ones. Okay? So we're going to be recognizable somehow. He didn't know what age we were going to be, but he hypothesized that we would be a combination of the glory of every age. We'll have the curiosity of a 5-year-old. We'll have the wisdom of a 90-year-old, whatever. How that works out as far as being, recognizable, who knows? But as far as the male and female thing, his guess on this, so far as I understand him, it was a little bit of a confusing argument to me, but his argument to me seems to have been, when he addressed this in the City of God, is that God wired our personhood along the lines of our gender. And so our gender, our biological sex is part of his image that he made us to be. So for example, women are generally speaking more nurturing than men. Mm-hmm. They're the givers of life. They take care of the baby. They feed the baby from their own bodies. I mean, there's all this miraculous stuff that women do to keep life going, right? So that is not just a function that their body has. That is a part of who they are because God's the giver of life, and he shows that through them. So Augustine, near as I understand him, expects those gender-specific characteristics to carry through into new heaven and new earth.
Gotcha. Yeah. So Adam, but sleep, rib, pull, rib, literally rib. I don't know, but
I think so. Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah.
Another time we're going to talk about that too.
All right.
Then there's Eve, right?
Yep.
Is it fair to say put Eve back into Adam, and that's the being, the soul, the completeness?
A reunification of the genders?
No, not necessarily. But what was Adam prior to Eve? You know, I think he probably had those traits, right? When he created Eve, it's almost like he tore those traits from Adam and had two people.
Interesting. Okay, gut reaction. I've never thought of this before.
Yeah.
Just processing on the fly, I would say probably not, because if Adam had all of those characteristics, I don't think God would have said it is not good for man to be alone. I think he would have said, hey, we can multiply this out or whatever, but there was something there that was incomplete. And so if God created Eve by dividing something that was complete, he wouldn't have expressed incompleteness.
Gotcha. It would have been whole to begin with.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that God took the raw material from Adam and
brought
terms
in the
of
other traits
rib.
needed.
Yeah, and then breathed his spirit, his life into her. That would make more sense to me.
Yeah, I could get behind that. How are we doing on time? Because I've got
matter.
one or two. Oh, wonderful. Well, you may get sleepy.
We are recording this late at night.
Okay, what did I write here?
I'm good, man. You brought me a cream soda. Does it have caffeine in it?
No, it does not. You're going down.
Oh.
I'll finish this for you. You can lay down.
You got 7 minutes until I crash.
What do we got here? Proverbs 28:27. How's your memory on that?
Zip.
Juxtaposed.
And this is a podcast on Proverbs, too, and that's the verse
yeah,
where I'm like, I have no idea.
This is a big one for me.
All right, 28:27.
Yeah.
And it says thusly, whoever gives to the poor will not want, but he who hides his eyes will get many a curse.
Doing bad, well, maybe not doing good, leads to curses.
Mm-hmm. Many, apparently.
Right. How would I finish this? I'm juxtaposing that with Jesus heals the man. We've talked about this a couple weeks ago. He heals the man, and they ask him. I think they asked. This might be more than a few weeks ago. Was he lame because or was it blind man? Did his parents sin? Or did he sin?
Yeah.
Right. And your teaching at that point was it was for the glory of God.
Yep.
Right. That particular moment for the glory of God, that particular man for the glory of God, was there sin as well that led to these curses? Do people trying to live the life and follow Jesus receive blessings because of that? You see all this tied together. It's almost like if you're doing the bad things, you're gonna see the curses.
Okay,
right? But Jesus is pointing out that he wasn't cursed because for any other reason than the glory of God.
Yeah, he said, look, it was not that this man sinned or his parents sinned. This happened so that this moment could take place and you guys could see who I am, and Dustin and Chris could read about it in 2,000 years.
Right. Is that a specific moment or is that in general? Because this verse is saying people, you're going to see curses.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so the definition of the word curse might be helpful here.
There.
So Hebrew is a very different language than English because they don't have a lot of words, not a lot of vocabulary to work with. So one word means a lot of things. So the word evil in Hebrew, if we see the word evil, in fact, I don't have the tools here to look it up right now, but that word curse that I just read might actually just be the word for evil. It might be, ra'ah in Hebrew. And it just means anything that we, like, sometimes it means actual evil. Sometimes it just means anything that we would consider to be experientially negative, right? I experienced a great evil today. I got hit in the face with a baseball bat.
Gotcha.
Okay. So he will experience many a curse. All that's saying, as specific as that can get, especially in a proverb where, you're dealing with big truths with a couple of words.
Right.
If you close your eyes to the needs of the poor, you ought not to expect that that's the pathway of blessing. You ought to expect that since God is watching, that's the pathway of cursing or of negativity, right?
Yeah, okay. Pathway would be better. It doesn't necessarily mean that Joe Schmo is going to you didn't take care of the poor, you're
Yeah,
going to see some trouble.
It's not a one-to-one correlation,
There you go.
right?
Okay.
Because other places in the Bible, they say, why do the wicked prosper?
Right.
Why does it work that way?
That's a great point.
Because it's not a one-to-one correlation. You think about, but it is true, generally speaking, and Proverbs lays it out. Like, this is the way the world pretty much works. And you got to factor God into that equation. You may, create a shady business deal right now so that you have a profit. But God exists and he has an opinion, and you need to know that money that you just made is not the last word on the issue.
Yeah.
There's no such thing as karma, but there is such thing as a God who keeps very long records.
Yeah.
Right? What goes around comes around. And you can see this in a lot of areas. I mean, for example, what's a good example? Like the hip hop community, okay? How many country singers get shot dead versus how many rappers get shot dead, right? Because country singers generally aren't singing about sleeping with a dude's girlfriend and busting a cap. Right.
The lifestyles are a little different too.
Yeah.
In general.
And the music is representation of their context and stuff. But I mean, think about it. What if, when guys freestyle, right? I mean, I know, I know you spend a lot of time watching freestyle battles.
Yeah, that didn't need to come out.
How many freestyle battles are full of compliments?
Right. Yeah.
Right. How different would their culture be if it was that? But instead it goes to the negative. It goes to the trashing. Nobody's like, yo, this man has a positive effect on the world around him. Wish that I could take his gifts and compound them and implant them into others. And then I'd have 10 of him. I'd nominate one of them and vote for him for president. Like that never happens. Got me going now.
Yeah,
this thing does have caffeine in it. You're a blast from the past. They don't make him like you anymore. They broke the mold and it shattered on the floor. They tried to pick up the pieces and make one like him, but it looked like a Picasso, all jacked up and frightening. I'm going to stop. It never happens that the human heart leads you that direction, right? When you act on impulse, it goes towards the flesh. It goes towards sin. And because of that, it winds up being a death culture.
Yeah.
Right? So you get back from God what you put out to the people that God cares about in the long run.
Yeah, it is a pathway conversation.
Yeah.
Where you headed? All right, last one.
That was really, really uncomfortable what I just did, by the way. I just want to mark that.
Yeah, that's why I'm skipping all the rest, and we're just going to do one more question.
That's never going to happen again. Yeah.
Okay, so
I don't freestyle anymore on stage or in public. This Mamma Jam is over. Now I need a new subject.
He's still going. I've had an idea for a while.
Kids, nothing good happens after 9 o'clock.
Yeah. Of a book I want to write one day. Just daydreaming. I'll never write this book. But I like the synopsis. And let me run it by you because I think it might be heretical.
Okay. Yeah. Heretical. Sure.
So daydreaming that there's a storyline of these angels that join Satan in the revolt. Okay. I daydream of these. Bible talks a lot about armies. Angel armies, right?
Definitely.
So I almost see that as, you would have your platoons and you would have your, militaries are segmented, and maybe they are in angelic terms too. So you have this group that follows Satan and is cast down.
Yep.
And I have this little group of this little battalion, 8 angels that have realized the error of their ways. They know they're not getting back. They know what's coming, but they still have some honor, and they choose to fight on behalf of the humans. So they've I don't know, left the army of Satan.
So they've defected from Satan's army,
exactly,
but without the possibility of rejoining God's army.
They know they're not going to get back into God's army. They know what's ahead of them, but at least they'll die on the right side of the conversation.
Whoa.
Or yeah, right. So, and could a guy write stories like that? Where, I don't know, is it ambiguous? Where it's middle of the road? I don't know if you really want to play with that because it's almost like teaching false gospel kind of stuff. There's just nothing to go into this. This is all one guy's daydream, and would a guy even tamper with that? Probably best leave that alone.
Okay, so this is personal opinion.
Yeah,
and guys might disagree with me on this. I'd be fine with it because it's not a truth claim.
No, absolutely not.
Right.
Yeah.
So when I'm teaching guys how to read their Bibles, the first thing I'm talking about is genre. What's the genre of this thing? And because every genre has different rules associated with it. If I read a newspaper, I've got a certain set of expectations that it's going to be brief, it's going to be full of facts, and it will be generally speaking, I shouldn't even say it. I was going to say, generally speaking, an accurate representation of the truth, but these days, what do you do, right? But it's going to be a truth claim, right? Somebody was willing to staple their name to that. If I read a Shakespeare sonnet, I've got no such expectations.
Sure.
And I don't think that each author is obligated to state the rules that they're operating by before they do it. We're expected to know that when we come to the literature. Yeah. If you write, there's historical fiction, right? A guy will write a novel around a historical event. Mm-hmm. The event happened, but these events that he's talking about didn't happen. These characters didn't actually exist. Yeah. The event of the fall of a third of the angels following Satan happened. What did it look like? What's this little 6 to 8 cohort doing? I think you're actually free with artistic license to make that up as long as you're not making a truth claim.
Right. No, I want to make some comic books is what I want to do. I think they'd be the coolest comic books.
Yeah, in fact, guys used to do this all the time in the ancient Jewish world. So you take a look at the books of Enoch, for example. They weren't even, everybody knows those weren't written by Enoch. Enoch was like, the 5th generation from Adam. These things popped up, I don't know, a couple hundred years before Jesus or something. So one of the rules of apocalyptic literature is that you're allowed to write in the name of one of the heroes of the faith, which is why, by the way, there's such a debate about whether John actually wrote Revelation, because it says it was written by John, but in apocalyptic literature, you're allowed to just say, hey, I'm John and I wrote this and be in character. So, he did write John. I've been thoroughly convinced of that, or he did write Revelation. But yeah, those guys did that all the time. They're filling in conversations between angelic beings and stuff. Nobody thinks this actually happened.
Right.
And yet they took the literature so seriously that it shaped their worldview. And you can even see quotes of it in the New Testament, like in the book of Jude and stuff. So, I think fair game.
All right, cool.
Maybe I think be careful with it, but fair game. Now, I think what would be over the line is if you start rewriting biblical storylines in order to fit your storyline better. Case in point, the movie Moana with Disney, right? She goes and interacts with like a demigod named Maui. Okay. Cute little story. It's a little bit pagan. There's no such thing as a demigod, but I'm not going to freak out over it. I just tell my kids when we're watching it, like, hey guys, that's not real. I was like, is Maui God? They're like, no. Like, what's Maui? He's a fake God. He's a demon. Like, right. Okay. So, which I just got from 1 Corinthians 10, I'm just teaching them that. My problem with Maui was not that he was a character in a Disney movie. My problem was he said that he created, that he put the sun and the moon in the sky.
Right.
Now I got beef, right? Hercules, same thing. I don't care if somebody makes a movie about Hercules. What I didn't like was at the beginning of it, he had a gospel choir telling the story of Hercules, and they sang, and that's the gospel truth.
Right.
Now I got beef.
Yeah, they can't even make Noah right. Did you ever watch Noah?
The Russell Crowe movie?
Yeah.
Okay, so quick story.
Wow.
My first mission trip with World Hope, I was going on my way over to Africa, and I watched it. And by the time I got off the plane, I was so fired up. I was like, like, we're going to go fix all of this right now. I was so mad, dude.
Oh, it was tough.
What a tire fire.
An opportunity. And even the director they picked up. Why this guy? Yeah. He's an avowed atheist.
Yeah.
Why would you?
He hates this whole thing.
Yeah. Wow.
Did you see the one with Christian Bale though, where they did the Exodus?
Yes.
That's worth watching.
Yeah.
My only problem with that was I didn't like their depiction of God. But what would you expect from Hollywood? Mm-hmm. But the story itself, they actually did a decent job for Hollywood. I'm adjusting for inflation here, but it wasn't a terrible representation of the storyline.
Yeah, great.
They filled in their gaps. So yeah, I think on the comic books, there's boundaries to be aware of, but you're good.
Yeah. See, where my heart's at on that is the comic. I don't know if you checked out comic books in the last 20 years, but they're foul.
Really,
they're just foul.
Feeding the flesh.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm all about that, like Calvin and Hobbes business.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. We could have. I don't know. Christian movies are coming along. They've come a long way.
They really have.
They're getting somewhere. Can't we have some good? And I've seen some good stuff, in that arena. But we need good stories and heroes, and they come. Then these fallen angels come alongside these human heroes to do good things and honorable things. Where the anyway, you get where I'm
well, yeah, and there could actually be a really good moral in there as far as like.
There's all kinds of material to pull from.
Yeah, like there's your life isn't over just because you've made mistakes.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we'll have to get to it. In free time.
All right,
good. Well, look, you covered everything, bro.
Chris with Romeo Surf, Romeo.surf. Mm-hmm. If you for all of your digital marketing and advertising needs, and how could I better have said? How could I better have said that?
That's great.
All right,
yeah.
Well, listen, guys, the world is a messed up place. Chris, can I get an amen?
Amen.
But we have a gospel that is perfectly suited to fix it. Can I get an amen?
Amen.
All right, guys, have that nimble on your lips. Be ready to share it with somebody in word and in deed. Preach the gospel at all times by every means you have available to you. And we will see you on the next one.
Hungry for Wisdom is a ministry of Grace and Truth Community in West Richland, Washington. You can find out more about us on our app, social media, or at graceandtruthcommunity.com. We love Him because He first loved us.